I'm good.
Let's go.
Oh, there's.
Hi everyone. Thanks for coming to join us for this presentation on the Wakhan Corridor. We've just got a few more people coming in. I'm just going to run through a little bit of housekeeping. It'll be great if whilst we're doing the demonstration, you can keep your microphones off. That would be awesome, just so everyone can hear. If for any reason it's a bit slow, you can always consider turning your camera off, so you haven't got the same sort of bandwidth. Basically the format is I'm going to give a little bit of introduction, and then Ade is going to do the presentation. The one we did on Wednesday, it was about 40 minutes, 45 minutes for the presentation, and then
her own company. And she's just gone back to Nepal. She lives in Nepal, but she's been in Maine in America with her. There
we go, that's better. Yeah, it's going to be 40 or 45 minutes of the presentation. Then there's some Q&A afterwards. If you've got any questions at any time, there is the chat function at the bottom of your screen, a little speech bubble. Put any questions into there, and then we will answer them at the end. And just finally, we are going to be recording this just in case we want to show it to people who are interested. So if you do not want to appear on it, then just sort of keep your camera off. So it's a little bit of an introduction. I'm one of the founders of Untamed Borders, and we work in arranging guiding trips in Central Asia, in the Middle East, in parts of East Africa and parts of Russia. But we started working in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So we as a company, we've been organizing trekking in the Wakan since 2009. Ade, who's going to give the presentation this summer, if all goes well, will be his 10th trip guiding in the Wakhan Corridor, sometimes for Untamed Borders. And he's done some other trips for as a private guide and for other organizations. I'll just say, as well as trekking trips in the Wakhan Corridor, we also organize trekking trips in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. But as I said, in Afghanistan, we have done a lot of work over the last 13 years since we've been working there. So as well as trekking trips, we organize cultural trips. This is Sakhi Shrine in Kabul. So we organize trips that visit the kind of historical and cultural places of interest in Afghanistan. We also organize other outdoor activities. This is a kayaking trip we organized in the Panjshir Valley, and we also organize ski trips. And in Afghanistan, we kind of believe in trying to put a little bit back. We've got a big link and sort of connection with Afghanistan. So we're one of the organizers of an event called the Marathon of Afghanistan. It's the only mixed gender sporting event in the country. So we're really proud to be part of a sort of slow social change movement within Afghanistan. And in addition to that, every person that books on a group trip with us, whether it's in Afghanistan or in another country, a small percentage of that goes to a tree planting project in Badakhshan. Badakhshan is the province of Afghanistan where the Wakhan Corridor is. So if you do come on this trip, you'll know that as well as having a great time, there'll be a small amount of the money that you pay for it will go towards, you know, improving the environment of Afghanistan. So that leads us on to Ade. So I'm just going to stop my little screen of presentations. I'll pass over to Ade, and I'll let him talk all things about the Wakhan Corridor.
Thanks, James. I'll just share my screen. Hang on. There we go. Share screen. And that one. Everybody see that okay? Good. Thanks. Well, thanks for joining me, and welcome to Afghanistan. So I know for some of you, you're in Australia, so I'll say good day, and the others, hello, and let's get on with it. So just a bit of an introduction to me. I'm Ade Summers, Welsh and Australian. I lead and organise various trips around the place, more wild, remote areas. this one in Afghanistan, and also the Himalayas, Mongolia and Pakistan, Central Asia. So that's sort of my little niche, I suppose. Tonight we're going to talk about the Wakhan Corridor. So for me, it's a special place. I've been there 9 times. I'm hoping to return in September, fingers crossed, inshallah, and all that. So tonight we'll talk about where is the Wakhan Corridor. Not many people have heard of it or know about it, so hopefully we'll get a bit of an education tonight. But about the history, the culture, and then we'll talk in detail about the trek, which way we go, how we manage it, the people we meet, amazing scenery, that sort of thing. And right at the end, I'll do a little talk on the great game of Buzkashi, which is quite an interesting event that occasionally happens up there. So let's just kick off with where is the Wakhan Corridor? Well, here's a map of Central Asia. So Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all the stands. And here is Afghanistan. If you notice, there's little, what they call the panhandle of Afghanistan, this little sticking out bit. That's where we're going. There's a bit more detailed maps. You can see Islamabad in Pakistan's there, Dushanbe in Tajikistan's there. And we have this little sticky out bit called the Wakhan Corridor. It's a bit more detail. So our trek comes in here with, from Tajikistan. So we're very close. And we also got Pakistan here. And that comes into the history, which I'll cover in a little bit. So I'll just put this picture up because it's really quite good. And it shows the mountain ranges in the area. So it's pretty much where mountains meet. You've got the Pamirs here, which is split into 2, the big Pamir and the little Pamir. And here we have the Hindu Kush Mountains, which run along the Pakistan-Afghan border. Further on south of here, or slightly southwest of here, is the Karakoram and later on the Himalaya. China's here, so you can see it really is a crossroads of cultures, countries, and mountain ranges. So a little bit on the history. So before sort of modern times, you had the Tsarist Russian Empire and the British Raj, and they were sort of competing and fighting over Afghanistan and India. And some wise man called Lord Durand came up with the idea of, you know, we're never really going to beat each other, so let's have a compromise. And they had the Durand line. So he drew a line on the map to say that's Russian, this is British, and our borders will never meet. So they annexed the Wakhan Corridor to Afghanistan in order to have a buffer zone. There's still been a lot of flowing and politics around the area, but that was the Lord Durand, in order to keep the empires apart, created the Wakhan Corridor effectively. It then got exaggerated when Mao took over in China, and the poor Kyrgyz, who had a migratory route up in the top end, basically got stuck there. We'll cover them later on. So just important thing to say, you know, people say, why did you go to Afghanistan? And isn't it dangerous with Taliban and insurgents? But they've never really been affected up there. There's never been any fighting with Taliban or insurgents. In the south, obviously, there has been, but in this part of Afghanistan, there's never been any trouble. I think it's just so remote and so wild, and there's nothing happens up there anyway, apart from sheep and goats and yaks. They just been left to get on with it, really. So the main cultural people there's the Wakhi people. There is Malay and generally pastoralists and semi-nomadic. And then the Kurds, who are trapped on their migratory route from Kyrgyzstan, are stuck right at the top end, and they just very much truly nomadic with their goats and sheep. They're an interesting set of people. So there we go. There's 2 ethnic groups, pastures, farmers, and the Kyrgyz. So the Wakhan Corridor starts pretty much at the north end of Badashan, and we come in from Tajikistan, and then the Kyrgyz in the top end. So over history, if you go back in before British history, Marco Polo visited there, Alexander the Great visited there. So it's a really mixed melting point. It's a major trade route on the Silk Road. And so cultures have been crossing through this area. You know, you often see some young lads who've got ginger hair and blue eyes and think, that could be, you know, some Alexander people or Irish people coming through. There's a lot of mixture in the race. So trekking there, why not? You know, it's a beautiful area for trekking. It's really exciting. Amazing mountains of the Hindu Kush and the Pamirs. Also for me, which adds to that experience, is the rich and spoiled culture. It's like going back 300 or 400 years. You're seeing a lifestyle and a culture which has been untouched from modern times. Only recently they're getting some solar panels in, and that's about the only real Western influence. It's I don't want to use the word museum, but it is a living culture. You know, they live in this experience pretty much untouched. And that's what excites me. And also for us going there, we can help them out financially. They got no real way of earning money apart from selling their livestock. So if we can go there, buy some food, employ them to help us out, it's a great way that they can earn cash and without selling their livestock. It's a real benefit to them. That means they can then buy additional things, you know, extra food, extra soap, toothbrushes, that sort of thing. So we get into the trek. So our trek starts in Dushanbe. Let's do it on a map. It's a bit more easier for me. So we fly to Dushanbe, generally from Istanbul. There's a 3-weekly flight, and Dushanbe is the capital of Tajikistan. And then straight away, we go on an amazing drive to the border here, which we're heading. We have a couple of days. It's quite a long drive. So we have about 8-hour drive to a place called Kalikum, spend the night there, which is a nice little town. We can do a bit of shopping, have a look around, and then it's a shortish drive considering we just come off a plane. Next morning up early, and this is the most dramatic part. We're following the Oxus River of the drive. It's a real raging sort of torrent of river, a lot of history to Korog, which is the center of the capital of Badashan province. You see there's the Badashan National Park there. This is still in Tajikistan, and we then have more shopping, look around the town. It's quite an interesting place. Then on the next morning, up early, it's about a 2-3 hour drive to the border where we cross into Afghanistan, where the fun starts happening. So this is just a little bit of video to show you on the Oxus River. What's interesting here is, oh, sorry, that was my finger trouble. There we go. What's interesting here is that the other side of the river is Afghanistan, and we're on the Tajik side. So you can see the border is the river, but there's not much going on. We end up in Korog. It's quite a developed city. As I said, it's the capital of Badashan province. So all the mod cons, especially in the food department, great place to do our final bit of shopping for all our luxuries. And then we just jump back into the Jeeps, and we can see these bridges here. That's the actual border. So this side is Afghanistan, and here we're in Tajikistan still. So difficult to get some photos at the border. The soldiers there are a little bit sensitive, but managed to sneak this one out. You see we've got the Afghan flag here. We've just crossed. So that's the main border, which is pretty much the bridge crossing the Oxus or the Amudarya River from Afghanistan to from Tajikistan to Afghanistan. So the kids there are really good fun. You know, they're a bit of a novelty. We always sort of attract a lot of attention when we turn up. And Ishkashim is a real sort of wild westy type place. So you can see it's very basic, a lot of handicraft stuff, but not for shopping for tourists, but for buying things and that sort of thing. So we can buy a lot of food there, a lot of our things there, but a lot of locals will do their shopping there as well. A few remnants and history of their past. So there's the tanks left over from various skirmishes. So this is a Soviet tank. And then we set off on our drive. So in Ishkashim, we do a lot of paperwork. They like to have a lot of paperwork just to keep bureaucrats busy. And so we spend a few hours, various offices and army bases and that sort of thing, which is quite good fun, really. Everybody buys you, has a cup of tea and has a chat. They're quite a novelty to be there. The reason I put this picture up is a great story. This is one of our Jeep drivers, and he spoke fluent German because in the past he escaped to Germany, to Europe, and spent 10 years living in Germany, driving a taxi. And when things quietened down a bit, he decided to come back and set up his life again in Afghanistan. Very patriotic guy. And so we employ him because he's just a really nice guy, a great Jeep driver. And my German isn't very good, but it's good to have that Western perspective on things. So this is the view just as we leave Ishkashim. You can see this is driving up, we're following the road here. Interesting, the Tajik Pamir Highway follows the same side of the opposite side of the river, just along this way, and we're going to parallel with it for a good half day before the valley splits and we go up this way. So this is lower down. You can see we're driving. The vehicles there, shall we say, are not in their best prime of life. I think Jeeps go there to die, really. They don't get sold on from Afghanistan or the Wakan. That's where they sort of end their days. And the bridges there, the roads there are not really up to M1 or motorway standard, to say the least. Sometimes the bridge is a little bit dodgy, so we take the safe option of walking across, good chance to stretch our legs, and then let the Jeeps go unloaded. You see the actual roadbed here is a bit sort of needing repair, shall we say. We end up in a place in Kandud, so we've gone from the Badashan province to actual Wakhan province, where we have to see the governor, who is an interesting character. So again, you have to have a cup of tea and listen to his politics and nod a lot, and then eventually you get your permit and you're on your way. But as I said, it's going back like 300 or 400 years when you know, there's no mechanical way of harvesting the wheat. You know, you got a kid with a few donkeys to thrash the wheat. So again, it's going back at least 200-300 years. Again, the kids are great. You know, they always come out and play. We end up playing cricket with a couple of kids, and it was really great experience. And then we're back on the road up the Wakan. So we zigzag the river, whichever is the best geography that the road takes. But you can see that the conditions aren't the best. Various river crossings along the way, which we'll see in a little bit. But it's just a fantastic drive. You can see there's one of our Jeeps with all our gear loaded up. Once we leave Ishkashim, we can't buy anything. So we've got everything we need comes with us. So we're quite heavily loaded. Unfortunately, the Jeeps don't always survive the journey. Here, the suspension broke, so we managed to drive a little bit further. So I think the driver knew it was on its way out because he had a spare with us. And you can see the shattered spring there, and he's getting ready to fit the new one. I was amazed. It only took just over an hour to fit a new spring in the suspension, and we're off again. So I think you have to be very resourceful. So on this trip, we had a few flat tires, and generally we had some spares, but then we ran out of spares. So we had to patch the tire. And this is a novel way, if you ever get caught, to try and get the tire off the rim. And here's just a little clips of video of some of our river crossings along the way. There we go. So anybody who's got a Toyota Corolla car, we've taken a Toyota Corolla through that river. So they're a lot tougher than you think you are. You can really bash them, abuse them a bit. So we end up in Shahad now, which is the end of the road and where the trek starts. So good place to organize. We've got to organize with the local people some yaks or horses to our support. We try and get yaks if we can. They're a bit more sturdier and they carry a bit more, but sometimes they're out grazing, so we have to have horses. It depends on what's available at the time. So you can see us organizing all our food for our 12-15-day trek. So we do it quite well. There's a lot of luxuries there, some good stuff from Tajikistan. We bring some stuff in from the UK, and then some of the basics are bought, like rice and flour in Ishkashim. The locals there, this guy was joking, saying, I've got a donkey. Can you hire my donkey to carry some stuff? But I refused. So again, basic stuff, no electricity in Shahad. So everything's cooked on and fueled by yak dung. So this is the start of the trek. So our trek is about 16 days. You can extend it. There's various routes between 21 days or even more, depends what you like. It's quite remote, as we'll see in a minute in the map. So we're fully supported by ourselves. There's no tea houses or there's no places to refuel or restock with food. So we go, everything's self-contained, everything we need for about 20 days we take with us. So with us, if you join one of our trips, you'll have to work a little bit more than in the Nepali trips, putting up tents, going to get water, maybe peeling a couple of spuds, that sort of thing. We try to be a bit more expedition style, and I think you get and I get a bit more out of it if we're actually doing more rather than just turn up, have a cup of tea and enjoy the view. So a bit more participative. So mainly, as I said, got yak and horse support, and we always have a horse for riding if anybody's having a bit of a bad day, or there's a number of river crossings we need to do. As soon as the water gets a bit too high, riding a horse across a river is the preferred method. Excuse me. So here's a map of the Wakan. So you can see we've driven all the way up here. Kandud, we have to visit the governor. We've come along, we're in Shahad now. So the route that Untamed Borders do, which I've done a number of times, is up through the valley to a place called Bozai Gumbaz, up to Lake Chatmatin. So those of you who are interested in literature in this area, there's a great book called 3 Cups of Tea by a slightly controversial guy called Greg Mortensen, and then subsequently he wrote a second book called Stones into Schools. And basically he set up a network of schools in the area in order to promote education for both boys and girls. And the second book concentrates a bit more when he built a school, and we'll visit there in a minute, in Gobai Gumbaz, which is an amazing logistical achievement, let alone physically building there. And then on this trip, we'll come back over the Abalis Pass. Well, here it's called Uwashan, but also known as Gurumdi. And then we'll come back down to Barak, back to Shahad, and get our jeeps. Another trip, and I've got some photos just to show you the variation, where we go up to Songkol Lake, and then cross another pass called Shawar Pass and come around that way. So there's lots of options. This is quite an interesting area. It's a bit flatter, but more Kyrgyz in the big Pamir and very close to Tajikistan. Here is a bit more Waki-based people. And here we got Pakistan. So one trip I've done is we came down the Wajir Valley and off to this valley. One of the sources of the Oxus was rumored to be what they call Curzon's Ice Caves, which was named after Lord Curzon, who was Governor General of India at the time. And we tried to find the source of the Oxus. Well, we got to the glacier where the water was coming out, and we thought, yep, that's probably one of the sources. The main source people can believe is Lake Chatmatin, and there's another source up in one of the rivers here, which some people are trying to find. They were going to look for it this year, and they're hopefully going to go next year. So basically, we traveled all the way up here. We're going to get going. There we go. And we're going to travel along the valley, which is all fairly straightforward, and then come back on a bit of a loop. So we're leaving Shahad now. So we always bump into a lot of people, a lot of the semi-nomadic people that are either taking their animals up or bringing them back, or the Kyrgyz come down, the World Wildlife Food Fund help support them, and they come down to Shahad, to the end of the road where the truck is, to get their supplies off the World Food Fund. So this is Dalis Pass, which is the first trek, the first day's trek. So I put this photo up because you can see this is our drive up the Wakan. So Shahad's tucked in just down to the left here, and we drove along here. Some of the river crossings are in this area. If the sun is shining and it's really hot sunny, the glaciers melt and a lot of these little rivers flood. So we have more of a challenging crossing. If the weather's cloudy like it was in this photo, the rivers are down. So the first day over Dalis Pass is a bit of a challenge. We've been sitting around for the best part of 5 days, and then we got Shahad's at 3.3, and we got a 3.9 pass to cross, and then drop down to 3.6 at our first camp. So it's a bit of a baptism of fire, but the views make up for it. So just a few group photos on the top of the pass looking down. So in this case, we have beautiful sunny weather. And then we drop down. There's not many bridges. There's only 2 bridges on the trek, and this is one of them, which is just as well. Otherwise, it'd be quite a challenging river crossing. But we managed to cross that. And then on the way, we meet various people. This guy, I called him the Grim Reaper. He's got his scythe because the semi-nomadic people will harvest the grass and collect it for winter for their animals. So these are some Kyrgyz people who are moving around, and you can tell by their dress what their sort of ethnic group is. A little bit of video with these same Kyrgyz people we met, and you can see they're riding yaks as their form of transport. You can see the yaks are quite tame, and they're semi-domesticated. You know, they're quite used to people riding them. Unlike yaks in other countries, who will be very skittish and very scared. So here's just a little bit more of a video showing they're not always riding. So these are the Kyrgyz who live right at the top end of the Wakan. You can tell by the dress. So ladies, Kyrgyz ladies with a white headscarf are married, and with a red headscarf are unmarried. So it's interesting, if you look at this guy carrying the box, there's a baby in there. That's the sort of cradle. So quite a wild life soon as you're born. No creature comforts. Another little kid here as well. Right then. Excuse me. So once we sort of start our trek, the trekking is fairly straightforward compared to, let's say, Nepal, where there are lots of ups and downs. You sort of tend to do a large trek up, and then you have some big flat sections, and then you drop down into a valley and some sloping sections to get over ridges. So it's not super demanding trekking. It's very remote, and the days tend to be long, as in kilometers, but not in time. Around 6-7 hours every day is a normal sort of trekking time. And the paths are fairly well established. As you see, there are always yaks and horses on them. So it's quite really enjoyable trekking. A few little challenging sections later where there's big drop-offs, but generally, you know, it's not super difficult. And there's always people to meet to keep you entertained, and the beautiful mountains in the background. And again, then it opens up as we start getting into the further up the Wakan, big open plains. So this is why the nomadic, semi-nomadic people come up in order to graze on these upland pastures. And there's always people around we generally have lots of cups of tea and taking photos. People love having their photos taken there. These days I start taking an instant camera, so I can take some good photos with my camera and then give them a present of an instant photo as well. I think it's quite a nice trade-off. And again, big open valleys. It reminds me, if anybody's been to Western Mongolia, it's very similar to Western Mongolia, where massive, if you remember your school geography, U-shaped glaciated valleys. So again, we have a few river crossings. Here, the weather wasn't quite so good. Gonna have to wear a bit of a poncho. So you can always have the option to ride a horse. And then generally on the river crossings, we have horses or yaks to cross with. So here, in the previous picture, it was horses. Here we got some yaks. And there's always our lads around to help you out. You know, you don't have to ride a yak on your horse in case your yak riding skills are a bit low. So there's always one of the guides or one of the lads to help you guide your yak. Here's a bit of video just to give you an example. You see the river's quite high here, so the locals don't seem to have any trouble, but it wouldn't be safe for us to sort of start wandering around with a big pack on. So we always take the safety option of jumping on a horse or a yak. There we go. But it's not just yaks in the area. There's lots of camels. These are Bactrim camels, so Central Asian camels, 2 humps, and they're being used to move things around and beasts of burden. Not so much riding these, but a lot of the, especially the Kyrgyz, can use them to move from camp to camp. On the way, we had a lot of petroglyphs around the place. No one's really dated it. After my last talk, someone messaged me to say, oh, they're very similar to the ones we have in Kyrgyzstan, and they're about 4000 BC. So that's quite old. So you can just make out an ibex goat here, and later on you can see guys with bows and arrows scratched and carved into the rock. And these are just lying on the trail. This was near a small settlement, but you know, they're just there. Or you walk past and go, oh, there's some carvings on there. So it's always good to stop and have a look. Unfortunately, there's not much history. No one really has done any research, so no one really knows what's there about. So say we camp. This is my tent a couple of years ago. I've got a bigger one now as I got more junk to carry. Beautiful sky, lovely campsite, but it's not always the case. So this is a couple of days later on that trip where we had a nice dump of snow. So even though this is mid to late summer, it's still, the weather still can be quite wild. Luckily, we always camping near some settlements, so the local people in the area that day invited us in, got a big yak fire going, warmed us up, and we all slept in there that night because we didn't want another night in the snow. So the people there are very friendly. You can see all our gloves drying out down there. So very friendly, very hospitable. Some of the girls are very shy. They're not that used to foreigners, but some of them, like the little kid, is just completely dazed by us. You know, who are these funny people? It's a great experience. And then obviously the weather improves dramatically and it's blue skies and we're off again. So again, we're moving all the way up into the Wakan, right to the top end. Really opens up. We're on our way to Bozai Gumbaz, where our school is, and Lake Chakmatin. You can see bigger U-shaped valleys, glaciated. And then we come into, these are the Kyrgyz people right near Lake Chakmatin. So again, saying you got ladies with white headscarves are married. Yeah, red ones are unmarried. That's just part of their culture. And there are lots of yaks up here. You can see lots of milking going on, lots of yak dung being dried for their winter and cooking. This is a Waki family, and we just got invited into their house. So you can see it's just, this is a summer settlement, so they probably moved down in the winter, but it's just a mudstone building, and they'll live there in the summer with their animals. So we're back with the Kyrgyz, big open valleys, lots of sheep dung. So yeah, lots of fuel. So these are lads, they just cook on the fuel. We got gas and all the mod cons of a camping trek, but the lads just got their 20-year-old teapot and cooking on yak dung. So lots of goats and sheep, and there's a number of different families that are all grouped together to look after the animals. They take them off grazing in the day, leave first thing, come back at the end of the day. Oh, what's going on? Oh, there we go. So with the sheep, they mainly for their wool, which they'll sell, and also for meat. A little bit of video now to cover that. So you can see not really that sophisticated setup for shooting the sheep. Oh, that's the same one. There we go. So some of the families then would sell the wool, or a number of them would make felt for covering their yurts. So I think a little bit of video just to see how they roll and make the felt. Maybe not. Yeah. I'm under a bit of techie trouble with the video there. I'll just move on. Bear with me a minute. Oh. There we go. So this is inside the yurts. Sorry, the video on the felt making didn't seem to want to play, so we'll just move on. So I just put this as one of my favorite photos. So you can see this young girl cooking us a cup of tea, but the sun was streaming in through the open roof of the yurt. She's cooking on the yak dung, and it was just shining perfectly on it. It's just a beautiful photo. Oh, there we go. So you can see the ladies there milking. They sort of spend the evenings and the mornings milking both the goats and the sheep, but also the yaks as well. So a lot of yak milk around, yak butter and yak yogurt. All, but they don't ferment it. Like in Western Mongolia, they ferment yak milk in order to make like a milk beer called arak. Here, they don't do that. Maybe no one's taught them. Could be a business opportunity. You can hear the sound, the wind. It's a wild, woody place. It's dramatic. So this is a beautiful summer day. You can imagine what it must be like in the winter. Like now, it'd be, you know, a foot or so of snow and minus 20, minus 30. Very family oriented. Everybody is, you know, really looks after their family and their extended family. The generosity amongst families and to us as well is phenomenal. Unfortunately, health up there is pretty bad. There's no sort of medical centers. Mortality is around 20%, so pretty bad. That means 20% survive. So 1 in 4 die, or 1 in 5 only survive. So it's really quite a wild, crazy place. You see, this this guy we've revisited must be quite wealthy, because he's got a solar panel, so that would be charging a radio and a light bulb, you know, battery for lights, that sort of thing. So technology is starting to come in, and you could call it development. You could call it, you know, the influence of Western world. So again, we have our horses here. On this trip, we had horses for carrying all our gear rather than yaks. And on this one, we had yaks. So you can see we're coming up. Lake Chakmatin is just off there. So we're sort of coming around into the Lake Chakmatin area. Oh, there it is, just there. It's one of those things. It's not like a sort of a big lake with a lake shore. It just goes wetter and wetter, and eventually you come to the water. The Kyrgyz live up there because it's got lots of grass, arable land, and they can graze their animals, and that's part of their migratory route. So here we've got piles and piles of yak dung. So that's their winter fuel and their dry in for the winter. They have lots of fuel, keep them warm, keep them cooked. And this is the lake there. So the boys there, this is our lads on the team. They were, you know, always up for a photograph. And then what I try to do is, as I say, take an instant photo and then print out some of my sort of bigger photos and give them to them when I visit the following year. This is a Kyrgyz yurt, but some of the Wakis have bought these yurts and they'll use them as well. So you can tell by the shape which sort of ethnic group they are. And again, covered in felt. This is Saki. He's one of our cooks. He always tries to, well, I always try and have him. He's a great cook. He's a great guy. And this year he brought his fishing net, but he didn't do very good on this fishing trip. He only came out with one little shrimp piece, bratty little thing. But then a couple of days later, he excelled himself, and we had fish and chips that night. It was pretty bloody good. So again, this is very typical geography of up in the top end of the Wakan, rolling hills, big hills. These are around 5,000 meter peaks. Here we're in the region of about 4,200, 4,300. So we're starting to head our way back down from the lake to start our loop around to the various passes, get some different cultural experiences. This is me on Gurum D Pass. So there you go. I got my Welsh nationality and for my Aussies, the Aussie flag there. So this pass is quite interesting. So I've crossed it about 5 or 6 times, and sometimes we've got a lot of snow. You can see I've got my gaiters on, and this time, other times it's just completely rubble and snow free. Oh, that's slightly out of sequence, but again, this is a settlement on our way to Gurum D Pass. So this is a photo of the group on Gurum D. So you can see on this occasion, there's only little pockets of snow. The actual main trail comes up through the middle, and that's pretty just rubble, you know, it's moraine. So again, oh, we got a British flag involved in this one. Oops, yeah. So then we drop back down and we're tying up this side valley now. And again, we got some lads who want their photo taken. It's such a nice photo. The lads are all smiling and happy. I think for some of the boys, it's just going out with the lads, you know, it's an escape from the wife, escape from the day-to-day chores, and going off on tour with the boys. They're like a rugby trip without the beer. And big open valleys. You know, this is probably a couple of mile wide, and the river's just coming through. For me, this is my sort of trekking. It's big, open, wide, amazing culture. So we're dropping back down. You can see it's getting a little bit more greener. Lots of side valleys. So these valleys lead off into Tajikistan. And this is just some summer settlement. So people have built this stone house, and there's a fireplace here for when they're grazing their animals, like a shepherd's hut. And we're dropping down a bit more, excuse me, into the more greener pasture areas. And this is why the Waki particularly come up, because they want this summer grass to fatten up the animals, to make them bigger, and also make them strong to survive the winter cold. So again, these are all these peaks here in Tajikistan. So we're dropping down, we're coming near the border. And this is just a panoramic picture, just to give you, I've stitched together, just to give you an idea of the expanse of the place. More lads' pictures, they love their picture taken. And a little bit of video to just show you the expanse and the width of the place. These tombs we just scroll past was Turek tombs. So from Turek times, when the Tureks invaded, they came through this area and they left these amazing tombs. This is the school teacher. We're up at Bozai Gumbaz, who is the school teacher for the school there. So in the winter months, the kids come to spend their time in school. In the summer, they're out looking after sheep and goats. And we sort of hired one of the yurts off them and used it as a mess tent. You can see the school chairs with their tables there. And we just set it up as a kitchen and that there. This is Go by Gumbaz, where the school is built. So I recommend, if you're interested in reading up on the area, 3 Cups of Tea and Stones into Schools is a very, very interesting book. So this is going over Gurum D Pass again with some yaks. So here we have a bit more snow. The yaks seem to manage the snow quite well. So we're sort of going up along this area, and then we're cutting across. Where you saw that other photo, I'll have to rearrange it. That was on a rocky place there just before the pass. And then we come through. So most of the animals can get through fine. The terrain isn't too difficult for them. It's not so difficult for us. And this is another panorama on the Gurumdi Pass to give you an idea of what the terrain's like. So again, this is quite dry for this time of year. And there's a bit of video just to show you when it was a bit more snowy. So the yaks are pretty tame, and this gives you a good example how tame and timid they are. So I'm sitting on a rock just to the right of the trail. I just put this picture up because there's a really good friend of mine, Amibeg. He's one of our local guides there. Doesn't speak a word of English, but just seems to understand what you want or what you need. And every trip, I try and employ him because he's just such a nice guy. And there's Saki again, who interesting on this photo, just after this, this was taken just after a small accident we had where we were carrying gas. We had 3 gas bottles carried by this yak. 2 were empty and 1 was full. It was the day before we were due in Shahad, so we had 1 more camp to go. And the yak took a stumble, and one of the gas bottles fell into the river, and the one that was in the river was the full one, of course. So that night we're cooking on gas, cooking on yak dung and wood. So the tea had a very smoky, interesting flavour to it. So back in Shahad, we sort of finished our trek, but we still got a fair bit of travelling to go. Greeted by the ladies of the village. And so this is Shahad. You can see beautiful, colourful grain they're growing. And this is the hot springs. So generally on trek, you know, we can wash in the river. We have a toilet and a shower tent, but it's nice to have some hot water. So here, the village has got a natural hot spring, and they've built a little house around it. So we pay a little bit of money and go in there and get cleaned up properly. The kids are back out. You know, they're pretty good. They're not really begging, but they're hoping they might get a present. So generally we leave a donation to the school or with the head of the village rather than give direct to the kids, because I think that's a bit of a problem. Don't want to add to a begging mentality. So we're back in civilization. So we still have a long drive back the way we came, back to the border, and then we cross the bridge and into Shahad. This is looking our last day. This is just driving to the border and then our last view of the Wakan before we cross, and we drive into Dushanbe. And the beauty is you cross over the bridge, you're back in civilization, you just advanced 300 to 400 years. So you can see the culture, and then you get beer. So, you know, it's one good reason to go on this trip is to dry out for a few weeks, but it's so good. That first beer about 2 hours after you cross back into Tajikistan tastes so good. So that's pretty much the end of the trekking bit. I'll just cover some points people might have, and we'll talk a bit about Buzkashi. Is it safe? I say I've been there 9 times. I've never had any sort of terrorist or insurrection problems. Lots of technical problems with the trek and paperwork and all that sort of usual trip expedition type stuff. But as far as security goes, never had any trouble. You know, we have excellent contacts, and we always keep updated by our local leaders there. The main dangers are the usual remote trekking dangers, but should things go bad, we do have helicopter evac options. Good insurance is important, but there is options to, you know, sort the situation out. You know, I'm first aid qualified, and we try and stop those accidents happening beforehand. So we always take a very conservative approach on any sort of river crossings or pass crossings. And so safety is always our #1 sort of priority. So that's sort of the trekking part. I just want to briefly cover Buzkashi, which is a great sort of event I've seen a number of times, and it's really quite exciting. So it's believed to have started in Turek times, Often people think it's the precursor to polo. It's where polo came from. So it's basically a wild sort of football, rugby, wrestling type game on horses with a headless goat. It basically, its origins come from improving strength, teamship and horsemanship, and it's played pretty much throughout Central Asia. So the name of the game is, they got this dead goat and you got two teams. Someone picks it up and you got to break away from the mass of people and then run off and score a goal effectively. And you keep playing until you've had enough, or the carcass, it doesn't really exist anymore. So you can see this guy here, he's off and running. He's got the goat just dangling there between his legs. This is a different game, but similar, where the goat is hooked under the guy's leg again, and he's going hell for leather just to escape the mass. So it can get quite brutal, quite violent, but yeah, that's life. You can see the goat is just being picked up from the floor there. So the horsemanship is incredible. You know, the guy's ability and balance and skill of staying on a horse is incredible. So this is Yar, one of our guides at the time. So he's wrestling with this guy to try and get the goat. So pretty much there's no rules. You can, you know, grab the other man's horse, you can pull it, you can, you know, thump him, you can do anything you like. And then eventually there's a winner. So here the teams all just lined up to sort of salute themselves. I've got a little bit of video just to show you how crazy it actually is. He's broke away and just going hell for leather to try and escape the mass and score a goal. So that's pretty much me done. Just a few more references I made for some, if anybody wants some further reading. So 3 Cups of Tea or Stones into Schools by Greg Mortensen is a fantastic read. The classic book for this area is A Short Walk in the Hindu Kush by Eric Newby. And for the overall history of the area, The Great Game by Peter Hopkirk, or any books by Peter Hopkirk are fantastic. Strongly recommend them. So that's me done. I'm pretty much, I hope you enjoyed that. And thanks for coming to visit. And I'll pass over to James now, who's going to take some questions for you.
Yeah, thank you, Ade. I know I've kind of muted everyone, but I'm sure we've already got a couple of people saying thanks so much for the presentation. So I'm sure there's a sort of virtual round of applause right now for you to say thanks for that. Yeah, really good. And we've got a few, we have got a few questions. So anyone else who's got any other questions, please, you know, write them in the chat box and we will we'll answer them now. So one of the things we got from Trevor, Ade, was apart from all the cups of tea, what sort of food, specifically kind of local food, do you eat on the trek?
It's pretty similar trekking food, you know, that you expect lots of vegetables, rice, dal. We buy a goat or a sheep when we can to sort of supplement this. But most of the food we either bring from Tajikistan or from Ishkashim. So it's pretty much a standard trekking soup. So soups, pastas, rice, dals, vegetables, curries. We have some tinned food with us as well. Not the only fresh meat is the sheep or goat we buy. And to be honest, we generally make kebabs from them, and it's a gift to our lads as well. So pretty much your standard trekking food.
And there's a further, thanks, Ade. There's a further question from Emma about issues, basically what's it like for a female traveling there. Do you want to discuss Tajikistan and the Wakhan Corridor, and then I can talk a little bit more about the rest of Afghanistan, because the Wakhan Corridor is quite different to travel in the rest of the country.
So as a woman, we've never had any trouble. We've everybody's really accepted. You've got to dress a little bit more respectfully, but as in, no boob tubes and hot pants, but, just standard trekking wear, as long as, you're not wearing shorts and sort of too much of a skimpy top, it's fine. In Ishkashim, which is this border town, which is the start of the Wakan, and so where the Wakan meets main Afghanistan, we just ask you to be a little bit more respectful. So wear a scarf and long sleeve shirts and trousers, but everybody's treated really, really quite respectfully there. So we've never had any trouble. Same with blokes, really, we prefer long sleeve shirts rather than t-shirts or stuff just in that town. And it's just because that's where all the official people are and where all the shops are. And there's more of a movement of other parts of Afghanistan. You will see ladies wearing full burqas there, and then you'll see ladies just wearing respectful, dressed like you saw in the photographs. So that is the crossover point. In Tajikistan, it's quite a modern sort of Western town area. You see ethnic Russian ladies wearing quite daring summer clothes, and then you see the Tajik ladies dressed a bit more respectfully. But I'd say on some trips, there's been more ladies on the trip than men. Generally, it's around 50-50. So, we've never had any issues, with harassment or anything.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I mean, former Soviet Central Asia, it's a real mix. There's a lot of conservative sort of families, but there was a recent ski resort I just saw. It opened this winter in Uzbekistan, and there were women in hot pants skiing down, which is not appropriate clothing at the best of times when skiing. But as Ade says, the Wakhi people who populate most of the Wakhan Corridor are Ismaili Muslims, and Ismaili Muslims generally have certainly to the Western eye, have a sort of lighter interpretation of Islam. There aren't mosques. They on Friday there's a thing called a Jamat Khana, which is a Friday house, which is as much a place of prayer as a communal meeting hall where people discuss their the problems and the issues of the community. And a lot of the women in the Wakhi women, some of them go heads hair uncovered. So it's certainly less conservative. Where we guide in the rest of Afghanistan, we don't have any issues having women on trips, but again, people have to dress conservatively. So when we're out, a headscarf, clothing that's loose, that doesn't hug the body. But I think, Ade, you can say once you're off trekking, it's a bit more easygoing because you're out and you're not meeting anyone, and you can sort of the headscarf can come off and things like that. And then if you meet up with groups, you can always slip it back on.
Exactly. Yeah. Once we're sort of off on the trek, then it's very much more relaxed. Generally, you're covered up because of the cold and the wind, so you're not going to be wearing your shorts then anyway. So it's more the geography dictates what you're wearing rather than the culture.
And I haven't got a question, but Jackie Paling, and I remember Jackie. I think I met Jackie about a decade ago, and I remember the name because Paling or Paling means smoked eel in Dutch, and I'd recently moved into the Netherlands. That's how I remember the name. She travelled there before, probably more than 10 years ago. So Ade, it's not a question, but when was the first time you went?
2009.
I was also 2009. We didn't know each other at that point.
No.
But what changes have you seen in the Wakan in that time? I mean, that's as much a question from me as from Jackie.
Yeah, well, initially is not that much. So Ishkashim, obviously mobile phones are a lot more prevalent and shops selling phones. They've finally got realistic power. So there's various lights and that sort of thing. In the Wakan, the only major change has been solar panels, and people have a solar panel, a battery, and I think I've seen one satellite dish. That's about it. The major change which is coming is the road which they're planning to build from further on from Sharad. So the road ends in Sharad, and they've started, or they're talking about, you get various rumors, to build a road up to Bozai Gumbaz, and probably it's funded by the Chinese, and officially it'll go into China, and it'll be part of their expansion of Belt and Road project. So that's coming, and that will change dramatically, because access will be so much more easier. As you can see, access to Shahad is fairly straightforward, even though with a few logistical problems. But from there on, it's just on foot or horse or animal. So then once the road gets there, more development, more the usual sort of stuff of that roads bring, as you see in other countries. So that will be the major change in the next 2 or 3 years.
And Ade, when you're talking about telecommunications, I certainly remember in 2009, everybody in the Wakhan Corridor had a Tajik SIM card because you're just over this other side of the river and there was no mobile phone connection in Afghanistan. So everybody had the mobile phones from the country next door because that was the only way you could get any reception. Is that still the case, or is there a bit more mobile? I was
messaging a friend in Ishkashim, and he walks up to a hill with his Tajik phone, and then we have a chat on Messenger or WhatsApp. So there's Afghan SIM cards, but they don't really go anything past Ishkashim. So
yeah, okay, that's the same as before. I know because we always have the sat phone to communicate with you. So I was just,
but then that connection leaves after a place called Kalipanja, where the valley splits. So you lose. There's a big mountain in the way of you and Tajikistan, so you can't find a tower. I remember driving back once, and it was right near Shahad, and there was a sort of a teenager, sort of young kid, sitting on the side of the road with his laptop, and you could see his phone, and he was obviously surfing the internet from the side of the road, so he could get a signal just looking at the Tajik tower. There's another town called Ishkashim on the Tajik side, and there's a big mobile tower there, and so that's their main form of communication because it's just so much more reliable.
Okay, thanks, Ade. I think that's all the questions. I mean, if anyone wants to turn their mic on, they can give Ade a round of applause or a thanks or something like that if they feel like it. But unless anyone's got any further questions, that's probably it. So thank you very much, Ade. I really appreciate the talk.
For turning up, and I hope you enjoyed it. Okay,
well, that's it. Let's call it a day. Thank you very much, everybody, for showing up. And if you've got any questions about the trip, anything about what Untamed Borders does or Ade do, then drop us an email at info@untamedborders.com. But enjoy the rest of the day or evening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, Ade, I just invited Alan to stay on.
Okay.
I know him from guiding him in Afghanistan and other places, so he might join.
Hello there. Hello.
You're Alan.
How you doing?
How are you? How are you, sir?
Alan's lived in Australia for about 200 years. You can tell he's lost his accent.
Lost his razor as well by the look of
it. Can you see? Let me see. Did I put the video on? Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah. Hold on, let me get off this. Do you want to get off the shared screen, Ade?
Yeah.
Hold on, I should probably stop recording this as well, shouldn't I?
Yeah, there we go. I'm on.
Thanks so much for that chat. That was awesome. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.